Hello everyone. Today we will talk about translation, Unit 1 of English syllabi for the students of BA 4th semester. Translation is very important in sharing knowledge, and in foreign language studies it constitutes a major component. This video will be in two parts where we will have a look one by one at what is translation. We will talk about its history, what is decoding and recoding, what are the principles a translator should follow while translating, what are the aims of translation, its various types, recent developments in translation, and what are the various fields where translation is being used. Now, what is translation? Though it is difficult to define translation, but we can say translation is both a changeover and transmission of meaning from one medium of communication to another medium or form of communication. Translation could be defined as an act of interpretation of the meaning of text and subsequent production of an equivalent text that communicates the same message in another language. The word translation comes from the Latin term translatio. This word means transporting or carry over. Another relevant term related to translation comes from ancient Greek word of metaphysis, which means to speak across, and from this the term metaphrase was born, which means a word for word translation. The concept of translation has changed a lot over the years. Earlier it was about just the translating of one language into another, but in today's concept, translation covers the vast transaction of human communication of all forms, culture and thoughts. A.H. Smith maintains about translation that to translate is to change into another language, retaining as much of the sense as one can. What does he mean to say here? He wants to say that sense or meaning of the original text should be retained by the translator while translating. In due course of time, translation has become translation studies discipline. Throughout the history, whether spoken or written, translation has played a very important role in interhuman communication, accessing to different kind of texts for scholarship and religious purposes, for trade and industry, but the study of translation as an academic discipline only really started in the second half of the 20th century. Translation as discipline was actually popularized by James S. Holmes. Now, translation activity is very ancient, and the history of translation has been a topic that has been long debated by scholars and historians. Though it is widely accepted that translation predates the Bible tells of different languages and show how people from different places talked to each other. The need for translation has been apparent since the earliest days of human interaction, whether it be for emotional, for business or survival reasons. It is known that the translation was carried out as early as the Mesopotamian era, when the Sumerian poem Gilgamesh was translated into Asian languages, and this dates back to around the second millennium BC. Some other translated works include those carried out by Buddhist monks who translated Indian documents into Chinese. The need for translation became greater with the development of religious texts and spiritual theories. As religion developed, the desire to spread the religious words and encourage the faith, and this means that the religious text needed to be available in multiple languages. In this way, we see that one of the first translated religious texts is known to have been that of the Old Testament, which was translated into Greek in 3rd century BC. This translation refers to the Septuagint, which was the translation of Hebrew Bible into Greek. Greek translation of Hebrew Bible became the basis for future translation of the Bible into many different languages. In earlier times, the act of translation was the only way for the transmission of different cultural and religious texts and concepts. In the West, the different ways of practicing translation were talked about by many translators among Cicero and others, dated 1st century BCE. Greek texts were also translated by Roman poets, and these were adopted to create and develop literary works for entertainment. It is shown that translation services were utilized in Rome by Cicero and Horace, and that these uses were continued through to 17th century, where newer practices were adopted. Then comes Saint Jerome. Around 4th century CE, Saint Jerome attempted to create a translation of the Old Testament based on Hebrew version. He translated the Bible into Latin, and this translation is known as the Vulgate. His translated Bible became a very prominent text for Roman Catholic Church. During the Protestant Reformation also, the Bible was quickly translated and spread. Translated writings of these people created a great impact and wielded a lot of influence until the 20th century. Constance Garnett was a British translator who translated Russian classes during 19th century. He translated Tolstoy, Chekhov, and Gogol, etc. into English. Gregory Rabassa was an American literary translator who translated numerous Latin documents into English throughout the 20th century. It is argued that the knowledge and findings of Greek academics was developed and understood very widely through the translation works of the Arabic scholars, and when the Greeks were conquered, their works were taken in by Arabic scholars, who translated them and created their own versions of the scientific, entertainment, and philosophical understandings. These Arabic versions were later translated into Latin during the Middle Ages, and resulting works provided the foundation of Renaissance academics. During Renaissance period, number of classical works were translated in European languages, and these translated works played very significant role in Renaissance. The aim of translation is to disseminate the knowledge, the expertise in different languages. So there is more of intercultural and international communications. Translation permits us to enjoy the transformation of the foreign into familiar, and for a brief time to live outside our own skins, our own preconceptions and misconceptions. Translation expands and deepens our world, our consciousness in innumerable and indescribable ways. Thus, it became a prominent mode of communication. The translation studies has set its particular aims. It promises a significant increase in readership and expands the number, essentially allowing more and more readers to be touched by the author's text. For writers whose first language is limited in terms of how many people speak it, translation is indispensable for achieving an audience of considerable size. It also asserts the possibility of a coherent, unified experience of knowledge in the world's multiplicity of languages and cultures, and thus translation aims at the universalizing the horizon of the knowledge. Translated text has two kinds of readers, an international one and a domestic one. And in this formula, a text like Gitanjali, uh, written originally in Bengali by Rabindranath Tagore, uh, it becomes accessible to non-Bengali global reader because it was translated into English. And also we could read Aristotle's Poetics only because it has been translated into English. So this is why interlingual translation is very important, and by translation number of people can read number of books. Now what is decoding and recoding in translation? Translation involves two types of activities. One is the understanding of the message of the source language, or decoding. What is the source language? Source language is the language the original text is written in, and in the process of decoding, the translator extracts the meaning from the source or original text. The second is the expression of this message in target language or recoding. The target language is the language spoken by the people the text is translated for, and in recoding, reconstruction of the text takes place. The transfer from decoding to recoding takes place in the subconscious mind of the translator. The translator first understands the cultural aspects, the linguistic aspects, and the idiolect aspects of the text. Then he reconstructs the source language text into target language text. Translating a text is not an easy task, and there are few principles laid by French scholar and humanist Etienne Dole, and these are as follows. A translator must fully understand the sense and meaning of the original author. He should have a perfect knowledge of both the source language and target language. He should avoid word for word translation. He should use forms of speech in common use. And translator should choose and order words appropriately to produce the correct tone. The search for right word is central to the process because the meaning of the original has to be retained in the target language as much as possible. The rest of the part we will cover in the next video. Have a good day.